Welcome in, everybody, to Scout's Eye on Football. I am Chris Landry as we are continuing our special draft previews. We've been doing it all week. We will continue it next week. Today up, we've got the NFC North. We're going to break down the rosters of those four teams, talk about what has happened in the free agency period. We're going to talk about some targets, some key team needs, and what have you, take you through that. On Monday, we're going to do the NFC South, and on Tuesday, the NFC West, and that will wrap it up. If you are missed any of our shows previewing it, you can go back in podcast form, go on LandryFootball.com, and you can check out the NFC East, the AFC West, the AFC South, the AFC North, the AFC East. We've got it all for you there. Also, we have the details up on LandryFootball.com. We have got the more in-depth breakdowns for our members, taking a look at the NFL draft by team. So we've taken an on-the-clock series, taking a look at all the teams, going in detail, giving you everything from an overview, their draft capital, their pre-draft depth chart, their team needs, their offseason moves that they've made, the free agent signings, their free agents and what's happened to them, potential targets for each picks. We've got it all for you in detail. So you want to make sure that you check it out if you're not yet a member of LandryFootball.com. What are you waiting on? It's a great time. It's always a great time, but probably no better time than right now as we are in the throes and less than a week away from the NFL draft. We've got the draft boards, the horizontal boards, the position boards, scouting reports on each and every one of these players, detailed scouting reports. So you want to check all of that out over at LandryFootball.com. In addition to what we're doing this week, a reminder that next week on Thursday, half an hour before the draft starts, so that'll be about, what time will that be? That'll be 6:30 Central Time, 7:30 Eastern Time next week on Thursday night. We'll get ready a half an hour before the draft starts, and we'll have a draft show. We'll take you through the draft all next week right here, right as you're watching us now. If you're listening to this in podcast form, this podcast, if you don't join us live, you're going to miss the draft. You're going to miss the draft as we're going to present it to you, all the behind-the-scenes look. So make sure you go to twitch.tv/Chris Landry Football. I'll go to LandryFootball.com and click on follow Chris on Twitch, and you sign up. Sign up, subscribe, and you'll get notices when we go live. You're going to absolutely love it. So, and it's obviously free to get it, so you want to take advantage of it. And make sure that you do it, though, before next Thursday so you can watch us live as we kind of break down the entire draft for you. Now, we had a trade today, and we're going to get to the details of that. If you haven't heard, Kansas City and Baltimore consummated a trade today. I'm going to tell you why it happened and break it down for you in its finite detail. But let me give you the details of it. Kansas City traded their first-round pick, which is the 31st pick in this draft. They gave up their third-round pick in this draft, and they gave up a fourth-round pick and a sixth-round pick. Fourth and a fifth-round pick in next year's draft. You think, well, that's an awful lot. Listen, and I'll explain the details of it a little bit more. Baltimore sends Kansas City Orlando Brown. Baltimore also sends Kansas City their second-round pick, which is 58th overall, and a sixth-round pick in 2022. So, it's a lot of numbers, and you're thinking, oh, boy, it's this and that. Here's what the trade is. Kansas City got Orlando Brown for the 31st overall pick in this draft and a fourth-round pick in 2022. That's what the trade comes down to. That's what they give up because and they'll give up between, I'd say, 12 to 18 spots between the 5th and 6th round next year. They move up. Yes, they give up their 3rd round pick, but they get a 2nd round pick. They move up from 94, Kansas City. From 94, they give up their 94th pick in this draft, move up to 58. So that's 40-plus spots that they gain. So it's a first this year. And again, remember my rule. There's no such thing as a first-round pick, right? It's a overall number. Their first, which is 31st, and a 4th in 2022. And we don't know where that's going to be. There's an assumption there that it'll be relatively late because of Kansas City's success. So first this year, a 4th next year, and about 12 to 18 spots between the 5th and 6th round. Because, again, all they're giving up is that 4th round. Their other picks are sliding, so they're giving up. So a lot of people will look at it and say, wow, like Chiefs gave up a whole lot. They gave up a first-round pick, 31st overall this year, and a 4th next year. Okay, and then they'll give up about 12 to 18 slots between the 5th and 6th round last year. That's what they're giving up. Because remember, they are gaining spots. So if you want to call the losing about 18 spots between the 5th and 6th round, they're gaining about 40 spots from 94 to 58 in this draft. So it is why is it done? Why do you make the move now? Why is Kansas City doing it? Well, we know that Kansas City's offensive line issues are a problem, needed to be addressed. They're looking at, and we've talked about this, they're looking at the offensive tackle population in this draft and saying, we're not comfortable that who we can get at 31 can come in and be a plug-and-play starter for us as a contending team. So they look at it, and Orlando Brown is still a good player. He graded out. We're talking a lot about the draft, but we hope that you that are members, and if you're not a member, this is maybe what you've missed. You also can go back and look. We take not only the free agency crop, but we grade every player in the league by position and tell you how players graded, and that's all in the free agent section. And we're not talking about it as much because we've talked about it a bunch in the past, but you go back and look and see how every player graded. That gives you a feel. Orlando Brown still graded out in low-grade red, which for those of you that are members, you know what the blue grades and the red grades and the purple grades mean. And that's still pretty good. He is an aging player, but he's a plug-and-play starter. The Chiefs now will have him at left tackle, Joe Thuney at left guard, Austin Blythe at center, Kyle Long, if he can stay healthy, at right guard, and then Mike Remmers at right tackle. And Laurent Tardif is coming back, so it gives them a swing interior guy. Remmers is a little bit of a liability and a loss there. We'll see what maybe they can do to mitigate that to some degree. It's a completely new offensive line, but it's certainly one that they've upgraded from where they have been this offseason to now. So they look at it as, and again, he's still a good player. It is not trading for Orlando Brown as a long-term move doesn't make sense for most teams. It doesn't. By the time that you mature and develop and grow, he will decline even further. He's a plug-and-play. We don't have time to take – we can maybe take one young guy, but we were not comfortable with putting a young guy in that left tackle spot. We need to move forward. Now, I still think there's a chance that they might do a little bit more and even add a young guy, but not on the offensive line I speak of, but not someone that they're going to rely on as much to be a plug-and-play as Orlando Brown. For Baltimore, it's a guy they were willing to move on from. They've got some work to do there. We went over the Ravens situation. They've got a lot of needs. They've got to rebuild their defense. So, look, they gave up 58, but they've got, if you look at what they have in terms of, they had 27. Now they got, they've got 27. they've got 31. So for them, yeah, they give up a player they were kind of looking to get younger at. So they basically give up 58, but they add 31, and then they get a third, and then they got 105, 132, 172, 185, 211, and we know that they need still, they absolutely need a young tackle, but they're more inclined to need to build towards the future with a young tackle. They need help, though, a lot more help than Kansas City needs. They need a guard. They need a linebacker. They need some edge rushers. They got to rebuild that defense. So it makes some sense they get more picks in which to deal with and get some picks next year. So everybody says, who won the trade, Chris? Trades usually work. First of all, like draft picks, you won't know until years from now who ended up with, on a given trade, the better end of the deal. The best trades are the ones that work for both, because it's usually both people are looking for different things. Most of the time people come with these trade ideas with their garbage and they want to get somebody's treasure. It doesn't work that way, trust me. So to me, it makes sense for both. It was somebody Baltimore wanted to move on from, somebody that Kansas City can plug and play. It's not a trade that they're going to make with a lot of people. Orlando is not as much of a fit for other people as it would be for Kansas City. So I say good move for both. And interesting to see what Baltimore is able to do with now 27 and 31. You can really help yourself out. It gives you some maneuverability there. Going to take your questions today. Hello, Fantasy Football. Hope you're doing well. Talking about the offense. Kev Belargo, always great. What a great friend of the program he is as well. Thank you for cheering us on 200 bits today. We appreciate anybody that is willing and capable of doing that. Cheer us on a few bits. Just like Kev Belargo did. Just put cheer 200 right there in the chat room. So we're going to go NFC North and go right into it, and we'll take your questions, comments in the chat room. We'll address it along the way. I want to see if there was anything that I needed to get to off the bat with any more news that I needed to cover, that I wanted to cover with you outside of the trade. Some thoughts that I had. I do think that the Ravens will sign Alejandro Villanueva sometimes, likely after the draft, but maybe before. Trying to think, there's been a lot of talk about, well, why didn't the Chargers make the move? Again, Chargers, listen, I think they believe in what they're doing, and I think they believe they can be better and more competitive. They do like Trey Pippins, though. I did do some to check it. Carolina is definitely interested in moving out of that pick. So I'm curious to see what happens, and I don't know. This draft's going to really be fun, around those picks. I mean, there's a lot of things that people are interested in the top, but since those picks come first, it's going to be interesting to see. That's going to be real interesting. What else that needs to be addressed? In Cleveland, as expected, not surprising news, certainly by any stretch, but it's news. It's done. It's the Browns have exercised fifth-year options on Denzel Ward. 24, 7 interceptions. He's played pretty well for him. He's graded out as well as anybody in Cleveland secondary. And then they drafted him in 2018, if you will remember. And Baker Mayfield. They exercised the fifth-year option on him. So those are some of the news of the day. All right, we'll address any thoughts that you might have, any questions you might have over in the chat room. So join us. I'm going to get into some NFC North action. And I'm going to start with the Chicago Bears. And it has certainly been one of the storylines this offseason about their chase for quarterback. Strong run at Russell Wilson. Still would like to figure out any way that they could possibly do that. They also made a run at Trent Williams with the offensive line and Kenny Galladay, and did not did not land any one of those guys. They did get Andy Dalton as an insurance with the idea that he's not the answer. They're not going to say that, but he's a good backup quarterback, and that's really important. It's just that you're not as comfortable with him as your number one. Signed Jermaine Ifedi. Somebody's not developed quite yet. And then they cut Kyle Fuller in part to get the Andy Dalton deal done. So it's not been the best of offseason and not quite hit what they wanted to do. There's not really any threat of a downfield passing game with Dalton. And it's been a long stretch now. By the way, I don't know if you've heard, but for Bears fans, if you're a Bear fan, Steve McMichael, who's remembered him not so long ago coming out of college, evaluating him. That was a long time ago now. Really underrated player for the Bears. Has unfortunately at I think Steve's 63-ish, and he's got ALS diagnosed 3 months ago, and he's rapidly declining. So keep him in your prayers. Things haven't been good. And you go back to the mid-'80s and that really good team, and he was such a big part of it. We lost Walter Payton. We think about it, we lost a few of them. Now, anyway, but if you look at what they've had there, they've just not had any quarterback success for some time. We could say that for the longest time about Detroit before Matthew Stafford. Certainly that was the case with Kansas City until Patrick Mahomes got there. And, yes, there was the stretch of Joe Montana. And you can't dismiss that at all. That's a big deal. But the Bears have got a long stretch. You're not here to fix history, and you can't go through that over and over again. But they've got some holes, and it's not all about the quarterback position. But they're going to be held back by the quarterback position until they're able to fix that. They got wide receiver on the offensive line, on the defensive side of the ball. We've got to remind folks that they did get into the playoffs. They beat some bad teams down the stretch, but, for the most part, that team was well prepared. And we'll see what they're able to do. They've got 20th. They've got 52, 84, 165, 205, 209, 222, and 229. Currently have all their picks in 2022. Let's go through needs, regardless of order of needs, but their needs. Talked a little bit about quarterback, offensive tackle. You signed Elijah Wilkerson, but they've had a pair of tackles that are in their 30s. They're just not very good there, and protecting the quarterback after finding one is going to be pivotal. Can you imagine Andy Dalton with limitations getting the ball down the field with an offensive line that can't protect? It's just not a good look. Linebacker on defense. Danny Trevathan is clearly past his prime. His prime is a liability now. He's a really good player. Oftentimes people will hear a name and hear a guy have success and somebody make a run. And Danny Trevathan is one of the more underrated linebackers for a few years and graded out very, very well. He's declined and is a liability now. They've got to upgrade that. They did sign Christian Jones. Receiver, they franchised Allen Robinson. I think of the two, I'd rather have Robertson than Galladay. I didn't think they were going to do both. I think Galladay was done mainly to kind of try to get something done with Robinson, and really they end up franchising him. But really, clearly their best receiver. They need two corners because they lost Kyle Fuller. They signed Desmond Trufant, but they've had a weakness at slot corner ever since Bryce Callahan has moved on. Safety's an issue that needs to be upgraded. They need running back depth behind David Montgomery. They signed Damian Williams to kind of limit the panic need at that. They need edge rushing depth. Mack and Quinn, they don't have anybody that can spell those guys. Jerry Atachu is a good player, but they need more there. They absolutely need more in all those areas. If you look at what they've been able to do, Damian Williams that I mentioned from the Chiefs, he's a number 2 guy. He's a solid number 2 guy. I think adding a young guy maybe later in the draft is something they'd like to do. Again, if they can find their young quarterback and give them patience, Andy Dalton could be a short-term starter and would be outstanding as a number 2. But we're not talking about someone that you're comfortable with as a starter. Allen Robinson, as I mentioned, is coming off his a really good season. And you don't have the consistent quarterback play or the play around him, so you don't see him have the type of success that he should have. Carlos Santos is very accurate, doesn't have great leg strength, 3 for 8 from plus 50 the past 4 years. In the cold weather, windy weather, it's an issue. It is an issue. You've got to be, comfortably within 42 or 43 at least. Jermaine Ifedi has been a bust since he's been in the league, certainly for the Seahawks. A guy you hope you can get something out of, but not great expectations. You hope you could end up getting someone who can realize his full potential, but I think he was a little bit overvalued. So let's look at the options for this team. Let's talk quarterback, and what are the options there? At 20, not in a great spot. Not in a great spot probably. Do they make a move if one of these quarterbacks slip? They're not in the best position to move up and get them. You've got New England at 15. I don't know that Minnesota's a player at 14. Philly at 12. Even Denver at 9. You got a lot of teams that might be willing to move up, and I don't see any of these guys dropping down to 20. I could maybe create a scenario. Mac Jones doesn't go third, that he could slip. Is that who they want? Is that who they have a high enough grade on? Would they take him at 20? I think you'd certainly have to consider that. I don't know that he's going to be there. I would think that Kyle Trask may be gone by 52 because of the overvalue of the quarterback, and I don't know that he's the answer for the Bears even at 52. I would think maybe somebody like a Jamie Newman, or if they like Kellen Mond more than I do, I think those are two guys that could be possibilities on the third round at 83. We'll see. Do they have time? Does Matt Nagy and have the time to work this roster, remake this roster, and develop a quarterback? I mean, I think that the mistake of Mitchell Trubisky is the example of what can happen when you make a mistake. You understand why people go out and try to attack that position, because if you don't have a quarterback, you're in trouble, and it may cost you your job. Mitchell Trubisky didn't work. Okay, it didn't work. It's may seem like a disaster, but now you got to go back and get up and try to find him. Got to figure out the quarterback position, and not being able to find a veteran is hurt them, retarded their growth. But they've got to look at it and can't be thinking that they're just a quarterback away. Though a quarterback with some promise would at least sell some hope going forward. Offensive tackle that I've talked about. They declined the option on Bobby Massey and Charles Leno. They're both older guys. Need, quite frankly, 2 tackles long range. Elijah Wilkinson was injury prone a whole bunch. So at 20, there's going to be a good tackle. You know the names. We've talked about them. The same guys. Darashaw and Vera Tucker. Those are some of the options that could potentially be there for him. And I think certainly would make some sense. Make a lot of sense, actually. And represent good value. Later on, guys like at Leatherwood and Radness and Jackson Carman, Spencer Brown, Brady Christensen, Walker Little, even later at 83, might be considerations. Another spot that we've talked about, corner. That's a need spot. There's, I think, real good chance that you're going to have corner value there on the board. Maybe Farley slips. Most people like Greg Newsome there. That's a little high for my blood, but there'll be a good player there. There'll be a good corner. There are 3 of them. Are all 3 going to be gone by 20? Possibly. Is there a 4th guy you got on your board? I think that's all in play. Asante Samuel, Melifano, Kelvin Joseph, Adebo, Rodarius Williams, Israel Bukamo. Guys like that all the way into the 3rd round got some value. And then receiver, we talked about. The 3 receiver set is under contract. And I do like Anthony Miller. I think Darnell Mooney could be a slot option. So we may see. We may see where it goes. I do like Miller's potential, but adding another guy here, would make some sense. Where's the value? By the way, there's a little bit of concern, and I'm curious to see how it plays out in teams' medical grades. Because I've gotten the information, but again, everybody has some a little more concerned than others about it. But the injury factor to Terrence Marshall of LSU could affect how somebody, it may scare some people away in the first round. You mitigate your risk into the maybe mid to late second. Does that bother you? That affect you? Don't know. It could certainly benefit Rashad Bateman, Kadarius Toney, and Elijah Moore. I think it's a little bit high there at 20, for those guys. I don't know that I see great value at receiver at 20, but I do see one at corner. I do see one at offensive tackle. We need to keep an eye out at quarterback. So what other options are there? Well, as I said, they absolutely could use some, build the defense. That's the thing. Oh, God, we need a quarterback. You can't force a pick, and you can't make a player better because he's on some damn list and he's just not that good of a player. Go get yourself a big-time player. So you start looking at it. If there's a receiver you can go up and get, or falls to you, fine. There'll be a lineman. There may be a linebacker that could be a really good edge guy. Phillips would be great value. Owa of Penn State, Russo, Zaven Collins would be a really good fit. Start build a defense. Start to kind of build a really good defense, and then before you know it, maybe you got something. So those are kind of the areas where I look at and say some of the potential targets with the Bears. The Lions, the receiving core is probably one of the hidden strengths of this team. It's graded out like in the top 10, top 12 past several years. And it's been guys like Golladay and Marvin Jones and Amendola. But it's a little bit of a change. This is going to be Brashad Perriman, Tyrell Williams. It'll be Perriman's 15 in 5 years. Not real good. Geronimo Allison was one of the weaker-looking slot safeties. So let's look at where they go. Matthew Stafford's gone, obviously. Jared Goff is coming in. So gone is the guy that could, quote-unquote, pick you up, carry you to some degree, maybe not be able to carry you that far, but now you've got a quarterback in Goff that could do less at the quarterback position, so you need to be better around him. You got some big issues and a lot of patience, and they better hit and start building this team a lot better than they have. They got the pick at 7, at 41, at 72, at 102, 113, and 154. Receivers, I mentioned, for a stretch was really, really good. It is a prime need spot now. One of many, but it is a prime need. I still worry about long range at quarterback. It's one of those teams that I wonder, what's the situation with Jared Goff long term? Exactly what is the situation with him? Possibly moving on from him. I think there's a lot of unknown there. I really do. If you look at the restructuring into his deal, the dead cap hits if he were cut now, which he's not going to be, was $40.5 million. Dead cap in 2022 is $30.5. 2023, $10 million. Let that sink in. He's going to be there for the next 2 years. 2023, they can move on from him. So, if the right quarterback is there at 7 or they're in a position to get him, do you pass on Trey Lance or Justin Fields if you have a good grade on them? I don't think you do. I think you draft them. I think you play them. I think you got Goff that you can play with. I think you got Goff that he can be an expensive backup, no doubt, but you got a rookie quarterback and let him play out. And certainly by 2023, you're moving on from him. If you want to move on before that, you're taking a bigger cap hit. But I do worry that they don't have their long-term answer at quarterback. Defensively, Trey Flowers is their only consistent edge rusher. Signed Charles Harris. They need another player that can get after the quarterback. They were poor against the run, and the upfront play was a big part of that. They traded for Michael Brockers. He helps. Not enough. We mentioned the receivers. I think they need 2. I think Williams and Perriman is a downgrade from when they were good and when they were a top 10 receiving core. They're no longer that. I'm not ready to give up on Jeff Okudah at all. He struggled as a rookie, but, they need a good corner opposite him, and he's going to have to develop. And they've got to get a replacement for Justin Coleman. Quentin Dunbar is a short-term answer. They need some help at linebacker. There's not a spot on defense that can't be upgraded. There's not a spot at all because there's an open corner spot. There's opposite Trey Flowers, side of Michael Brockers. There's a lot of need for upgrade. Anzalone will help them, particularly in coverage. You'll get into more of what those free agent signings mean. I think they need upgrade on the interior of their offensive line. I think safety help. They signed Randy Bullock at kicker. I'm not quite sure how that's going to play out. We shall see. Quentin Dunbar signed from the Seahawks. He was the Redskins' top corner in 2019. He didn't do that well last year. He's got the lingering knee injury. If he can stay healthy and Okudah can take a step up, then that's an improvement within their current roster. Jamal Williams was signed from the Packers, 2 years, $7.5 million. And he did a good job at both a runner and a receiver out of the backfield, and he's a good number 2. And he really is. I think he's an outstanding number 2 running back. And I think he and DeAndre Swift, Kerryon Johnson, is not a bad look there. Alec Anzalone that we talked about is a very versatile guy that can cover well. He's just had trouble staying healthy. Rashard Perriman, we talked about, it's a one-year deal, so it's not a bad contract. It was a disappointment with the Jets. He's got some upside, a former first-round pick. Hope they catch lightning in a bottle. I thought Bullock did a good job as Cincinnati's kicker, 80% of his attempts the past 4 years. So I think that has a chance to work out. Mentioned Galladay signed with the Giants. Thought he was one of the better receivers in the league. Jamal Agnew, good kick returners, one of the top kick returners in the league, off to Jacksonville. Marvin Jones also off with Jacksonville. I thought he had a nice season. Prater didn't have a really good season. He's going on to Arizona. It's certainly been a good kicker. Deron Harmon, safety, signed over with the Falcons. Roman Okwara is a guy that could get some sacks. They've now lost that. And Desmond Trufant's gone in the division with the Bears. But he just did not play well last year, and I don't know that they're going to miss that. So we've got some work to do, this Detroit team. We went over the quarterback situation. I think you know kind of where they are, much like the Bears, or maybe a little bit different. Maybe the Bears are a little bit more desperate. The Lions are starting with a new regime, so they've got a little bit more time, it would seem. But the quarterback situation is something at 7 they might be more into. Or if they don't like them, they can go with somebody later. Or they will punt that and deal with it later and see what Jared Goff can do with them in the short term. Outside receiver, Kyle Pitts is not going to drop to 7. Certainly he's a big-time threat. They'd love a Jamar Chase. It's a big-time need for him. I think 7 just makes a whole lot of sense if it's not quarterback, that it's receiver. It's just value there is so good that Chase and Pitts are gone, then Smith or Waddle makes a whole lot of sense to me. Again, Tyrell Williams a 1-year deal. Rashard Perriman's a 1-year deal. It may be the worst depth chart at receiver in the league. Certainly one of the best. Certainly a candidate. They could double dip at receiver. I expect them to go pretty high if the board allows it. You can come back with De'Ami Brown or Tywin Wallace or Seth Williams. They've got some real needs there. No question about it. On the defensive side, we talked about their moves at corner and Quentin Dunbar and obviously Jeff Okudah last year, but they were dead last in pass coverage playing man. They were really bad. And Aaron Glenn wants to play a lot of that. How much he can, not sure. Aaron Glenn's a really good coach coming over from New Orleans with Dan Campbell. Without Trufant, without Justin Coleman, who's their slot guy, they've got some work to do. Now, would Detroit surprise folks and go with one of the corners at 7? It is not out of the question. I think, again, Chase, Pitts, Lawrence, personally, while I'm not suggesting that they will do it or they'd even give it strong consideration. Personally, even in their spot with Taylor Decker and Terrell Crosby, they're comfortable enough with their offensive line. But I think of the top 4 players on the board, Sewell will be gone probably. But I'd consider that because he was so high up the board. But he'll be gone, Lawrence will be gone, and I think Pitts and Chase are going to be gone. So it's fair game, again, because I may have a Smith and Waddle at 7-8, and I may have Surtain at 9 and a Farley at 10, and there's nothing. The 6-5 grades are fair game. Do they see the corners a little bit better, or they see them as I do and decide we're going to go in that direction because we feel better about our depth at receiver later. Very possible. Very possible. It's a big need. Surtain, Horn, Fairley would not be reaches. I think 7 would be a reach for a guy like Newsome. I think Stokes and Campbell would be candidates at 41 if that's what they were going to do. It would be great if a guy like Calvin Joseph would have slipped there. I think at 72, Melifano will probably be gone. St. Just, who can play in the slot, would help them. That's another spot of a need that they have is a slot guy. So they have got to rush the passer better. That's another thing that I would throw in. You know, if I tell you that Zaven Collins or Jalen Phillips went 7, you'd probably flip out. You shouldn't. That is not a reach. That is within grade range. It would not be, anything wrong with those picks if that's the direction that they went. It's not the direction I would go because I do think in my stacking that I see a few guys a little bit better. However, that's why we got the board. That's why we explain the board the way we do, and we give you the true feel for what it is. So obviously there's a whole lot of work to do on this team. And if you look at how this depth chart looks right now, and you can go on LandryFootball.com and see it and really let it jump out at you. You look and see receiving core really looks bad and weak. Offensive line serviceable, running back serviceable, quarterback serviceable, you hope. One good edge rusher, one good defensive tackle. Hope you can get something out of Okora. And hope Bakuda gets better. Hope Dunbar can come back and play. I mean, you've got a lot of hope there. A lot of hope. Hope's not a strategy. Got a lot of work to do for this team. So Detroit, worst-looking roster in this division. The most work. Freshest start, I guess. They've got the free reign to go ahead and do what needs to be done. Green Bay. Interesting team. Good team. Contending team. We tend to forget home field advantage in the playoffs. We tend to think that the Buccaneers had it all along. They won the Super Bowl, but they didn't have it all along. Green Bay was 13-3. They did it drafting a quarterback last year. That's sat. Curious to see where that develops. Jordan Love and what that affects long range with Aaron Rodgers. But Devontae Adams generated so much production for them. He's truly one of the best receivers in the league, and there's not a whole lot opposite him. They did not address the receiver position adequately last year. Aaron Rodgers hadn't had 2 receivers in the top 50 in any of the past 4 years. Despite having a great one, they've got some real issues there. And certainly Lazard and Marquise Valdez-Scantling, you would think maybe they could develop a little bit more, but we're talking about fringe guys. We're talking about fourth guys. They don't have a number 2. We talk a lot about, well, this team doesn't have a number 1. They have number 2s. This guy doesn't have a number 2. This team doesn't have a number 2 receiver. So they really don't have anybody that could take advantage of roll coverage to Adams' direction. They had a really good 2. I mean, could you imagine if they had a Claypool or T. Higgins or Michael Pittman from last year? Something they really need. Defensive tackle, they need to strengthen their defensive line. They're very poor against the run. We can talk about weapons on offense, talk about the quarterback. They've got to be able to stop people. When they went to the Super Bowl and won it, their defense could get stops. They can't get stops. They got to outscore people. They've got to stop the run. They've got to get to the quarterback. Linebacker, the middle of their defense, got to get better. This is a weak team against the run. Weak from a playoff caliber perspective, too weak to advance and to hold serve in a home field advantage situation, which they were last year. You can't just bring a great quarterback with a great offense and say, go win it for us. We can't do anything. The Chiefs 2 years ago got it done. They got it done with the quarterback. They got it done with an offense, but they also got it done with very good situational defense. They weren't as good last year. They couldn't get as many stops last year, and it was a factor, one of the factors. The biggest factor in the Super Bowl was the Chiefs' offensive line. But the defense couldn't carry the day in a given game, and sometimes you need that. Right tackle's a need on offense. Preston Smith has been a disappointment as a pass rusher. Got to get improvement there. Guys, they've worked to draft guys in their secondary. Jair Alexander is one of the top corners in the league, but they need help there. Kevin King's re-signed. Corey Lindsey is been one of the better centers. He re-signed Aaron Jones, which makes a lot of sense. But Lindsey is a big loss going to the Chargers, and his absence is going to be felt. No question about that. He is 30, but they've got to get a young guy. They've got to fit. And again, let's remind you that the Pack are picking 29th, 62nd, 93rd, 136, 143, 174, 179, 215, 221, and 258. Aaron Jones, makes sense to sign him. 4 years, $48 million, maybe a little bit rich. He's not an elite back, but he's a really good back. He's averaged 5.5 yards a carry. A lot of how they structure their offense contributes to that. Guy's a really good back. He is good in all areas. He's not elite. He's, I think, grades out in the blue areas in the pass game. He's only 26. He doesn't have a lot of wear and tear. He's really valuable for what they do. It's one of those cases where he was more valuable to them than he's in the open market. The tight end, Tonyan kid, the restricted free agent, I don't know that he's the answer at tight end, but you know what? He's filled the role pretty well for them. Could use an upgrade. Kevin King is a solid number 2 corner. They need him to play and play well in that secondary that they've put so much emphasis on. So what are their needs? Certainly we've talked about receiver, but let's get into a couple of other areas. Off the ball linebacker. Run defense, again, has been a problem. We talked about the defensive tackle. Linebacker is a big issue. Christian Kirksey was released to open up cap space. You got Chris Barnes, Kamal Martin, and Oren Burks. It's just not good enough there. 29, they love. I think of Jamin Davis, Owusu Koromora, second round of Jabril Cox, a Dylan Moses, a Chaz Surratt. They've got some options that they're going to have to take advantage of, to me, at linebacker at some point. Outside corner, we talked a little bit about kind of where they are. Kevin King is their number 2 guy. Alexander's elite, so you've got something that you're working with. I don't like the long-term option for Kevin King as the number 2 guy, and I think it really depends upon how they feel about Josh Jackson. He has to be the guy that I think can develop into that number 2. He's been a backup, and I think that's what he is. If they're not as comfortable, certainly a Newsome or a Stokes at corner would make some sense. A Joseph would make some sense. A slot corner, Trevin Moore would make a lot of sense. Asante Samuel, Aaron Robinson. I don't know. I don't think you should decide on this, but boy, they have invested so much into the secondary that it's hard to believe them doing it. But they will work their board and work their board well. Receiver. What receiver of value is going to be there? Would an Elijah Moore be there? Rashad Bateman, Kadarius Toney. We just talked about Terrence Marshall. Top 3 are going to be gone. You put a guy with Devontae Adams, you put a weapon. You take a Green Bay team, and it's you've got to be able to defend the run a little bit better defensively. Another weapon on offense, and we know this Packer team is just they're good. They're going to be in the mix. They got to hit it right, but they need more ammunition. They need more juice. They need more gas to finish. They just haven't had it for some time. And finally, Minnesota. They had the injuries last year, mainly Danielle Hunter that hurt them the most. But their set of edge defenders ranked 5th to last among the 32 teams in pass rush grades. They bring back Stephen Weatherly, but the pass rush production is not good. Now, the one thing you look at and say, well, things will get better by being healthy. They've got 14, 19, 91, 121, 120, 126, 135, 144, 158, 169, 200, 224. Some needs, more specifically going into this roster before we get into the free agents. Defensive tackle. Well, there was a stretch there where they were really good at defensive tackle. They could line up, and you say that Viking team, that defense can stack up, and it's just not there now. I mean, it was awful. Obviously, said 2020. Now Michael Pierce is returning. Dalvin Tomlinson, that can certainly help. Danielle Hunter comes back, can help. Weatherly, we'll get into that in a second. Lost Riley Reef. It's a problem. We'll address that. Ezra Cleveland had a nice rookie year, but they still need another guard. They traded for Mason Cole. Not sure is the long-term answer. They're going to need another linebacker. They signed Nick Vigil. I thought Anthony Harris regressed at safety last year. So that led to him. It moved on from him, and he went to Philly. So you look at the safety spot, and obviously they've got one of the elite safeties in the league in Harrison Smith, but the guy next to him has got to play better. They couldn't cover anyone last year with all the injuries. Patrick Peterson is not the Patrick Peterson that you know and love. He's 31, declining. Short-term, stopgap measure. Hopefully he can get a good year out of him. That's what they hope. And Mackenzie Alexander they've signed. So let's take a look. Dalvin Tomlinson, big-time run stuffer, can generate some push in the pass rush. Going to need that to happen. Patrick Peterson, let's see if they can get a year or two out of him. That would be a positive. Xavier Woods, signed from the Combars. That was a one-year deal, $2.25 million. Decent starting safety. I thought he did a pretty good job in coverage. Missed too many tackles. But he's 26, room for improvement. So that's got to hit. And we got to always factor in. It's why we're doing this. To give you an idea what they did in free agency and what some of the value is and how it might mitigate some of the needs next week. Mackenzie Alexander at Cincinnati did a good job as their slot corner in the first year. And they're going to need production out of him. And that's going to make that needs in the secondary that I mentioned mitigated. Those are the needs. These are the guys that they sign. And I've given you painting a picture of kind of how they've signed it, what they've done. Harris didn't play well, as I mentioned. Kyle Rudolph is a solid receiver and great blocker, but, he's a declining player. Mentioned Harris is off to Philly. Reef is off to Cincinnati. Eric Wilson is off to Philly. Igabino is off with the Giants. Mike Boone is off to Denver. So let's take a look at it. What their offensive tackle situation is and how things line up and where they might want to go. They've got no answer right now at left tackle. That is a prime need. And so you look at kind of where they are at 14. It certainly makes some sense if they want to go in that direction. But they'll be some good defensive options. So let's go through them here. Offensive tackle. They've drafted a lot of guys. Bradbury and O'Neal are really good starters. Ezra Cleveland, they hope is. Then, I think they got 3 guys potentially that are quality starters. That leaves 2 other spots. I maybe a little, consideration for Rashad Slater, maybe a little high for Darius Shaw. But I think that's a consideration at 14. Vera Tucker would be a consideration, the only one, in my opinion, at guard. Down the line, a Miners or a Trey Smith would make some sense in the 3rd round. Deontay Brown, Aaron Banks as well. I think edge rusher is where we need to look at, folks, at 14. Danielle Hunter has to come back and play well. I'm worried because of a neck injury is not any other injury. They were 28th in an adjusted sack rate last year, and that's a result of the injuries. But Hunter's locked up long term. They need more from him. They need more around him, and they've got to get good pass rushers. So where do they go? Is it Jalen Phillips? Is it Greg Rousseau? Is it Kwity Paye? Who do they have ranked there? Who do they think is value there? I think that would be the odds-on favorite in terms of value, what their board tells them, relative to what their needs, probably makes the most sense. We shall see. If not, you're dealing with a Ronnie Perkins, Rashad Weaver, Patrick Jones. I just think, later on, Quincy Roche and Pete Werner and Ojibano, guys like that, 3rd round. I think, personally, that with their philosophy and with their head coach, they're going to look at it as the need to fix that defense. I mean, who wouldn't? But, you got a defensive coach that is going to be focused on that. That's of their needs, of their priority, that would be priority number 1. And I think that's where value could be. So I think we need to watch that, and we need to maybe look at it as a strong sign. I don't like, for example, I would say this. The edge rushers that I mentioned, Vera Tucker or Slater on the offensive line. And I think that's it. I don't think there's great enough value anywhere else. I guess you can throw in a Micah Parsons. You could. You could do that. But we'll see. We'll see. Pass rush is going to be the focus. I think safety is another need. We mentioned Anthony Harris played on the franchise tag, signed a 1-year deal with the Eagles. Xavier Woods is, I think they feel enough of an answer. There's not an option at 14. 3rd round rather. I think Cisco, Caden Stearns. I think Richie Grant's probably gone. Darius Washington, DeMar Hamlin, Richard LeCounte, kind of 3rd, 4th round options. I think those are areas down the road. But that's kind of how I see Minnesota, and that's how I see the NFC North. The Pack are the one team that can be competitive and potentially do damage into the playoffs if they're able to fill in some pieces on defense and get another playmaker on offense. But it's primarily the defense. The Bears, not there. The Vikings are not there, and the Lions are certainly not there. So, but we don't want to be in that situation if you're one of those teams saying that again next year. So they've got to figure it out. A reminder again, we appreciate you joining us. I appreciate Kev and Fantasy Football 101. Little light in the chat room today. I guess it's Friday. I guess people got other things that they're doing. I get that, getting an early start on the weekend. We appreciate you folks that are listening. We certainly appreciate Kev and Fantasy Football joining us. I hope you guys have a great weekend. We will do NFC South on Monday. Be prepared for that. and then NFC West on Tuesday. And then, we'll get you ready. And then, I think what we're going to do on Thursday and Friday, since the shows we're going to be starting the draft shows that day. We probably won't do the hour and then break and then come back. We'll probably just do that. So we'll do shows Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then obviously do the long shows Thursday, Friday, and then of course Saturday draft. So reminder to everyone, spread the word about what we're doing here. The shows next week, the draft shows. LandryFootball.com. You can get all the detailed scouting reports on all these players, all the horizontal boards, the vertical boards, the inside the draft room, each and every team analyzed. We've got it for you over at LandryFootball.com. So take advantage of it. If you missed it, the Chiefs traded for Orlando Brown Jr. today. Essentially, this is what you need to know. They gave up their first-round pick, which is 31st, and their fourth-round pick next year for him. Oh, there were other details. The Chiefs also traded their third-round pick, but got the Ravens' second-round pick. The Chiefs also gave up their fourth and fifth-round picks next year, but got the Ravens' sixth-round pick next year. So the loss gain factor was Baltimore gaining 2 picks, the 31st in this year's draft, and a fourth-round pick in 2022. That's what the Ravens got. Now the Ravens have 27 and 31. They give up 58, but again, by moving up to 31, they gave up their 2. To Kansas City gave up their 3 to move up. So it's basically, if you knock it down and clear it out, it's the 31st overall pick and a fourth-round pick in 2022. And so I think that there's a reason to believe optimistic for both teams. Baltimore gets more picks. They've got a longer way to go. They're a bit more of a rebuild situation. Kansas City's got a plug-and-play offensive tackle. They'll line up with Orlando Brown at left tackle, Joe Thuney at left guard, Austin Blythe at center, Kyle Long, they hope, at right guard. They've got Levant Tardif coming back as a potential starting interior offensive lineman. Kyle Long has not been able to stay healthy. And then Mike Remmers at right tackle. So they have completely rebuilt their offensive line with a completely different look from last year. So they are understanding the importance of it. And I wouldn't rule out at some point, and maybe even early, them trying to even add another younger guy there to the mix. But the bottom line, they made the move because people have asked me earlier today, well, why would they make that move now? Why wouldn't they do it during the draft? It's a little bit more detailed and complicated, so getting it done now helps. Here's why. The Chiefs decided whoever they could get at 31, and they don't see that the top tackles that they like, they don't see a starting left tackle right away out of this draft for them. They see someone who can be a starting tackle perhaps, but not right away. So they needed to fix that and fix it now with a veteran. Orlando Brown's not an ideal fit for others because of his age, but still has some good play on a team that's contending. So makes sense to me all the way around. Hey, appreciate you, Kev. Appreciate your Fantasy Football 101 and all of you out there that maybe didn't participate but are listening. We will talk to you on Monday. Keep it to LandryFootball.com all the weekend long, as we'll keep you up to date with the notebooks and everything going on. College and pro football. Got a lot of transfer news, recruiting news in college up there as well. And we've got more news, notes, rumors, gathering from meetings and discussing with folks around the league. So it will be a busy weekend. A lot of people will be on the phone all weekend. I will be busy with that, and we'll provide you that on LandryFootball.com. Another reason why you need to be a member. take advantage of the scouting season offer right now over at Landry Football. We'll talk to you on Monday afternoon, 4 p.m. Central Time, 5 p.m. Eastern. Have a great weekend, everybody.